Hello, going to be looking at a radio today. This is the RadioLink T12D, and when RadioLink asked me to take a look at this, I said to them, look, to be quite honest, I think the world of FPV has gone completely Express LRS and they're using operating systems like EdgeTX or OpenTX. I don't know if your radio is going to gain any traction because it's doing something else. And he said, look, we think it's really good, could you take a look at it? And as I'd already decided to take a look at their flight control, I thought, okay, why not? Let's take a look, maybe offer something to somebody which is going to be useful. Some people don't like the sort of way that things like EdgeTX do things. They like a better thing like which is the switch for dual rate. It's like, which switch would you like it to be on is the EdgeTX way of doing it. There's more than one way to do it, and some people don't like that. Maybe this will work for them. So let's see what we get inside. Okay, just sliding this thing out and a USB cable has dropped out, USB-C, and at the back of this is an actual printed instruction manual where a good half of the book is printed with full colour images in English, but that's quite nice. Definitely something you don't get in EdgeTX. Nicely packaged sort of thing. And in here we have the following. We've got some sort of thing and a spring, presumably for changing perhaps one of the sticks to be sprung. We've got this receiver. This is an RC12F, and it says S-Bus plus CRSF plus PWM. Does it all. And then we've got the radio itself, which looks like this. Not a bad looking radio. I have to say, it feels quite hard plasticky. There's absolutely no padding on the sides there, which makes it feel a little bit plasticky, quite frankly. You've got on it freeway switch, freeway switch, freeway switch, two-way switch. Two dials with no centre. Feel a little bit on the loose side. You've got spacers here that don't do anything. You've got this thing here labelled simulator, which is your 3.5mm jack, the old way of doing it. They've got a USB socket there. Then you've got these kind of like sliders, but they spring back into the centre. Normal trim tabs here, a power button, and you've got like mode, and you've got a rotating thing and an OK button there. Sticks feel okay, not fantastic. It says on the website that these are ball bearing type sticks, so not Hall effect presumably. And in here you've got an adapter for 8 AA batteries. It says the input is 7.4 to 18 volts, and there is a little two-pronged plug there. I'll show you that in close-up later. So it says it's got 12 fully proportional channels. It says long-range modules are supported. I don't see a module bay though, so not quite sure how that works. I'll have to, maybe that's in the instructions. It says it's running this operating system called FreeRTOS plus LVGL GUI. It's got a colour screen, I do know that, but I've never heard of this, either the GUI or the FreeRTOS. It sounds like it's some sort of open source thing, I don't know. And it's like, it says 50 groups of model storage. I guess we should put a battery in and find out what happens. Also, I have a read through the manual. There's quite a lot to read. Maybe that will attract people, actual proper instructions. I haven't looked at the quality of what the instructions are like, but we'll take a look and then we'll go into close-up and we will see what this thing's all about. So you can see this comes on and it has a fairly nice colour screen here, and I've been messing about with it without looking at the menu at all, and just without like knowing what happens. It's fairly easy to, you know, go around the menus and see stuff. It is very obvious, like reverse, endpoints, channel speed, aux channel, that sort of thing. All pretty straightforward so far. I'm going to read the manual. But one of the bits I was really confused about, it says this can take an external module, and all I see on the back is this. And this is the one bit I got the manual out to see what it says, and the only thing I can find it saying is external module mount hole, which doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to have to find out what that means. In the meantime, I will go through the book, although it looks fairly straightforward. But the first thing I wanted to do is update the firmware, because one of the things they did, at the moment this is the SIM port, which is kind of a bit old-fashioned, and most bits would use the USB. And you've got USB there, and if you upgrade the firmware, you can then use that USB to fly sims and things. So I thought I'll do that first and we'll see what that's like. Okay, this is what I was talking about on the RadioLink website about needing 171 to use that, and currently we are on either 10, that's hardware version, I guess 140, so let's get this thing downloaded and installed. Okay, some of this seems very familiar. First off, to get into USB upgrade mode, 2 trims in, boot mode. So we want to go into USB mode. Okay, then we can plug it in. Okay, once we get the USB cable in into the computer, we'll get a drive. Mine's called No Name, and what we have in it, this is the internal storage of the radio. We just have a bunch of bin files for the models. Now I haven't touched the models yet. It actually says in the manual that we should also get a firmware folder, which we don't have. So I'm thinking, should I make one? Because what I downloaded was this. If I drag this over into here, what I might do is just create a firmware directory and shove it inside. Okay, I've gone ahead and I've put that in the firmware directory that I just created. Now what I should have to do is go and say exit, or press the end key. Right, so we've got the option to then upgrade, so let's go ahead. Yes, we want to upgrade. So we did need, well, maybe we didn't need the folder, but it certainly seems to have detected it that way. Okay, successful. Press end. Now if it then detects something when I plug in. Nothing changes on the controller, but let's check it's detected in a SIM. Okay, quite unashamedly, I've got my own SIM here. So if we go to radio joystick setting, yeah, it certainly seems to, oops, be called RadioLink. If I pick this up, yeah, it looks alright. Somewhat weirdly, I don't have any switches happening. I have these things linked to something, and one of the back things here does something, but I can't find the other things, but I don't know if they're actually set up. But apart from that, it seems to work. I'll try some one-handed flying here because I'm holding my phone looking at that. Yeah, it feels okay. Well, it feels okay now I've done some calibration. To start with, the sticks weren't that responsive. They sort of maxed out at about 3/4 way through, but do the calibration and they feel a lot better, even if I only am using one hand. Who says you need 2 hands for this? Yeah, but I'll check out how the switches and stuff need to be sorted out for that. Okay, so I've now read the manual, played with the radio a bit, and I'm ready to talk about things. Take off a few of the buzzwords we saw in here. First off, it talks about FreeRTOS plus LVGL GUI. Well, FreeRTOS is an open source and free real-time operating system for embedded devices. Real-time operating system means things are very predictable. If you do something, you need to know it's going to compete within that time and not compete with other tasks on the operating system, and that basically handles that one. LVGL is just a lightweight versatile graphics library, I think it stands for. Happen to know that one because I'm dealing with it at the moment. It's something else, but that's kind of just like, this is a graphics library we use. It's a bit like saying we use OpenGL. It's not too much to it really. So moving on to this guy. This is pretty simple radio to use and hasn't got as many ways of doing stuff as things like OpenTX. So I think the reason people would want it over something else is because it has a manual which is fairly well written and tells you stuff and how to do it in pretty simple terms. That's something it's got over stuff like OpenTX or EdgeTX, if you like. Now, the whole thing with attaching a module, unfortunately, as I said, doesn't come with a bay. But what you can buy, and I mention that because it's extra, is an adapter. And what the adapter does is hold the module, screw into here, you take that bit out and you put basically the thing through. That's sort of like the multiple pins you'd have in the back of a module bay. but it's an optional extra, which is a bit of a shame really, but there you go. If you want to run ELRS or Crossfire, which will work, basically anything that uses CRSF will work, you can buy the adapter which goes on there and a little plug that goes through there. We don't have that. So I'll be looking at this little receiver that came with it, which I'm just going to power up for now with USB, and you'll see it come on like that, and straight away we've got a little bit of information. We've got the RSSI, we've got the RX voltage. So everything is done via, this is to go into a menu, this is to select something, this is to come out. So your basic menus are your basic menu settings basically. You can monitor to channels here, you can do stuff. We can reverse channels here. Now when I was on the simulator I had a reverse on my throttle, and you can just toggle that back and forth like so. You've then got endpoints. If we were on Betaflight and I sort of moved this across and it was like, oh, that's going to like 1,000 and something USECs, I could just come here and I could take the top figure up or down and then do the same with the lower figure. Pretty easy so far. We've got a channel speed setting, and this is specifically for slowing down channels that need to operate slowly, and you might do that if you were using your flaps and you wanted them to deploy slowly, or landing gear or stuff like that. Aux channel talks about what switches are going to be allocated to what channel. So channel 6 is VRA, which is that one, they're all nicely labelled, and for example 5 is null, so I could change that to, let's say it was that one, let's say it was my ARM switch, change to that, and that will then work. And trims here will let you define what neutral trim is on a per model basis, on a per channel basis. And then you've got mixes where you can do your dual rates or expo on whatever channel you want. Pretty self-explanatory so far. On the model settings we've got stuff like type and flight mode and things like that. So what I did, I went ahead and tried creating a few models. So you see here I've got one that says quad. Oh, just one thing about this which is funny, instead of rename they said rechristen, which I find interesting. So what I then did is I went into my model settings and said I'm a type of quad, as it puts it there, because I wanted to see what it would do. Didn't do a whole lot of things, but I defined myself a flight mode to this stick here, and just so it tells me, you see it goes acro to stabilize to sport. There wasn't angle, there was angle and horizon available, and you'll see that if we go back in the main settings, we've got acro. Nope, we're using the wrong one. Acro, stabilize, sport, just as a visual representation there, and of course you've got a graphic to say I am a quad. So there is something in the model setting called conditions. This is where you might set up something to do something more internal in the radio. For example, I've set it up so I've got the wrong switch there, SWB I should say. So I've got one switch which is up, middle and down. And what I've done with this, I've said this will control the rate curve for each one. I can actually have it on different things, but then if I go to the rate section, and you'll see it's got the condition 1, and if I move that switch, condition 2, condition 3, and you'll see what I've got there is a different rate, so 50%, 75, 100, which is just, you know, the old traditional way of setting up rates on a radio rather than doing it in something like iNav or bits like that. And then you've got throttle curve and a throttle hold, which I guess you can think of as like a cruise control if you like. You'd set your throttle hold on a certain amount and it will just cruise on a plane, hover on a quad, perhaps something like that. I don't think it's something I'd ever use, but it's there. Then in your transmitter settings is where you go for your models. You've got 50 memories here. There's no like SD card or anything in there. You see I've set up a couple just to see what they did. System setting will just like what language you're in and what sounds a key makes. We've got a stick mode, so you can go between mode 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's also calibration. Mine wasn't quite calibrated right, so it would get to 100% there, and I still had this much left, so worth doing the calibration on this one. Then got the stuff with trainer port, all pretty straightforward stuff if you've seen this sort of thing before. Got a timer section where you can go up, down on how you turn it on and how you set the alarm for it. Switches settings, which literally just says is this a 3-position or 2-position switch, so you can choose to treat them as 2-position switches even if they are 3-position switches. And then we've just got the boot settings, the animation. We can change colour for the theme, and this will just tell us our versions that we're running. So receiver settings are interesting. As you see, what we've got here, we've got the internal module, because we haven't got an option. All the receivers for this one run an FHSS system. I think they quote this as being good for about 4K, but obviously it's going to depend a little bit. And we can set specific IDs on if you want. There's a very interesting feature on these RF things using the IDs where you can bind it to multiple controllers and switch between them. I think the example they gave is perhaps you've got like a digger and a dump truck, and the digger loads into the dump truck and then the dump truck drives away. We can just press a button and flick between the two receivers that way. Quite neat. In sensors you can do things like your RSI alarm voltages, battery voltage alarms, that sort of thing. And failsafe, you can set each channel certain things. This is what we used to do in old flight controllers. Like when I had an autopilot, if it lost signal, then in the FreeSky receiver I would set it to say channel 3 is like full and channel 5 or 6 or whatever is RTH, so it would basically have a signal basically saying I'm going home at full speed. It's kind of a little bit old school, I suppose, but good to have it if you've got like more traditional models and things. I went on and I set up a couple of models just to see what would happen, because I wanted to see what mix it would do. So quad didn't do anything special, and I obviously set up my extra switches to do things. When I went to wing, and this is like a delta wing mix, you've got an option to basically say yes, this is a delta wing. So if we go into model settings, basically you just got this thing here that says delta wing mix, and I've said on and told it my 2 channels, because of course if you were mixing this manually then you'd have to have your aileron and elevator mixed together to get elevons, and that seems to work. You see, if we go left right or up down, we seem to get the right movement on the 6 there. And ditto, I did another one where I said give me a VTEL, and again it's got a little thing saying would you like to use a VTEL, and if so is it channel 2, channel 4, and it gives me the option of percentages. And so when I go ahead and do that, I left and right are normal, up and down have the 2 channels to move the 2 VTEL elevators at the back. That's about it for the radio. The receivers are really quite interesting, just from the fact about how they work. First off, and if you look at that carefully, it says SBus, CRSF, PWM. It supports all of those in certain modes. For a standard, you've got the PWM channels, very much a normal thing, especially if you're an old school fixed wing pilot. You just plug your channels into your servos or whatever and you go and fly it. It also does a PWM plus SBus, where SBus works on channel 12. And to change the way this works, you've got this little button in here that will change the modes. So if we do a short press to that button, you'll see it's now got the blue and red lights on. So that way you've got 11 PWM channels and a 12 channel that does SBus. Pretty useful if like you're connecting SBus to some sort of flight controller and that takes the first 5 channels. Then you've got the PWM channels for things like perhaps pan and tilt and that sort of thing. So if I go ahead and press that little button twice rapidly, this wasn't the one I intended, but this is an interesting one where all 3 lights are on. It means it's got PWM, CRSF and SBus all working together. So SBus comes out of here. You've got the RX and TX channels for CRSF and the rest of them are PWM. I can't imagine a place where you'd need all of them at the same time, but it is there. And then another press you'll see is given green and red, which means CRSF plus PWM. Going through all the modes, it seems like it's not possible to just run CRSF, so you'll always have at least PWM running, whether you like it or not. So yeah, the receiver looks okay. I haven't tested anything at the moment, obviously, but I quite like the modes. Obviously, if you just wanted it to run CRSF, then you don't need all these big PWM receptacles, and you could have like a really tiny receiver instead. So what would lead you to buy something like the RadioLink T12D over something like a Radiomaster, any model at all? Well, basically, you'd have to really hate OpenTX or EdgeTX as it now is, and if you really didn't get on with that or didn't understand how to do things, then this manual is really helpful for setting this up. I still feel like this manual kind of deals mostly with the traditional stuff. You know, it's got mixes for things like bait boats and little sort of dumper trucks and things like that, all in its setup. So it's kind of old school, but it's got the ability to assign switches to anything still, so that's good. One thing I don't like about this radio, and I've mentioned it before, is this all plastic. It's all plastic, so it's not particularly grippy. It would get slippy if you sweated. Just about every other radio I have, and I don't think I've seen one with quite the same, these are sort of a rubberized feel, and they're much more grippier and much more comfortable in your hands. So the ergonomics of this one is a bit lacking. It seems like a weird oversight. It's a shame as well that they don't have a charge circuit, so if you plugged in the USB then the battery would charge. I've got in here at the moment this old Life battery I used to have in my Tyrannus, which is on its last legs, but you can at least put a decent range of batteries in there, up to sort of a 4S LiPo. The other question would be, how quad friendly is this? Obviously this is not really for a quad, it's far too big. It'll suit a fixed wing though, and if you have a look at the average Express LRS receiver, it's pretty small. They do smaller receivers, but they don't run CRSF, they run S-Bus or PPM, which is a little bit behind, but there you go. That's the T12D. So I suppose the only other differentiation you might think about is the price. Is this any cheaper or more expensive than, for example, a Radiomaster radio? Well, currently RadioLink seem to be only selling on AliExpress. And just to put things on US dollars so we can compare easily, you have got the Mode 2 version of this, which comes with the R12F receiver, and also now an ERS module base, so you can actually plug something into there. $95. If you wanted to go the whole thing, and for example you wanted to get like an ERS version of this, $117.59, and they do their own module for it. In comparison, if we look at the Radiomaster site, we get things like the Radiomaster Pocket for about $55, the TX12 version 2, tend to think of as quite similar, although mono screen, $99. So the prices are similar. So it really is about, do you like this thing with a fairly simple way of doing things in a manual, or do you like EdgeTX, which is for many people complex, but it lets you do quite a lot in very different ways. Choice is yours. Anyway, many thanks for RadioLink for sending this along. This has been the T12D review, and if you're interested, of course, there'll be links down below. Hope this has been helpful. I'll catch you next one. Bye for now.
Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.